Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to 323 Weekly. This is our third week in action, so covering week 3 this time around of North America's HGC, and using that to springboard into week 4, which is the last full week of games here in this first phase. Week 5 is only going to be Friday and Saturday, so if you want to waste your whole weekend watching HOTS like I do because I have no social life, your last chance. Joining me as the last 2 times is Flag. Flag, great to have you on again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun talking about Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. Well, it's a new week, and you know what that means. First thing we got to jump into are the highlights. So, No Tomorrow versus B-Step. This is game number 2 on Dragonshire, but Jason goes a little bit too deep, tries to get away. King Caffeine says, no you don't. Great Ring of Frost from K1 Pro, but the turnaround stuns from Airho with the Mosh, not enough. Airho gonna get picked off by that combo Jaina and Falstad. Casanova gonna fall next. Talking Trees tries to go away. King Caffeine says, hey, where you going? Where are you going? And McIntyre says, right into my lightning bolt. That's where you're going. B-Step off to a great start in this series, going up 2-0, trying to put the series away in game number 3 on Infernal Shrines. Great shrine control by No Tomorrow in this game, but not getting the kills as King Caffeine goes in, but a little bit of a missed opportunity as the stasis from Chromie saves from the Sulfura Smash. Still not enough to keep Casanova alive. He's going to fall to the Starfall. iDream, though, gets completely zoned out, but that Shadow Charge from Diablo doing great work. iDream going to come in, find Ariel on the backside, and Tyrande Chromie being broken out in this one. And the damage was real later that game, trying to go for the convincing win. B-Step decides, you know what? John Cena's fine on his own. Let's go get the camp. Airho says, no you don't. Stage dive in. But this Chromie Tyrande damage is ridiculous. Casanova just repeatedly getting deleted. 7 Stratus Strike completely zones out Airho. Once again, Shadow Charge is going to get the kill. Bodies are just flying everywhere. Chromie Tyrande. I'll repeat that. Chromie Tyrande. B-Step goes on to win this one. 3-0. Superstars Gale Force, 2 very similar teams, and when you think Gale Force, you're going to be thinking Towers of Doom and Globals. And here's why. Fan, gonna land a good 3-man Void Prism, and all of a sudden, that's just enough time for Michael Udall to come down and Equinox, and they're gonna say hi. Goku gonna get deleted, Mighty Gust underneath the tower. Superstars just trying to get away using that Glaurung portal, but Gale Force on the chase. Fan just played such a great game on Zeratul. He actually went 3-0 on Zeratul this weekend, and Gale Force actually going to 6-cap the tower here, and they'll win the game off a 6-cap in Pro HOTS in 12 minutes. Gale Force dominating Superstars, and it only gets worse from there. Game 2, Brax's holdout, a Gale Force specialty. And we're seeing Crowan playing the ETC and Equinox on the Artanis. Double swap from the Artanis. A little bit of a trick they learned from B-Step in week 1. As the 4-man Mosh is going to be absolutely deadly. But what's even better is the cleanse from Akaface to keep that Mosh alive. Gale Force absolutely dominating Superstars. So, couple of 3-0 series there, as we see B-Step beating up on No Tomorrow. Probably not too surprising. B-Step's been struggling a bit, but Gale Force, on the other hand, I think we both expected them to do pretty well against Superstars.
Yeah. And I think, a big piece of that was the fact that Gale Force denied Superstars from being able to pick up Vala, at least in 2 of those games.
Srey is extremely big on Vala, and for good reason. They've done good work with it. She's an incredibly high damage hero.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was a very short Friday, not too surprising here. But it was definitely nice to see kind of a tighter focus on B-step. I don't know if a lot of that was them, practicing and getting, back in the rhythm, or if it was No Tomorrow making a lot of misplays. Might have been a combination of the two of those. Either way, B-step definitely put on a show for that first series.
Yeah, and I think Gale Force was always going to be a tough out for superstars. I mean, when you get down to it, you think both of those teams, and you think about kind of crazier drafts. You think about a heavy focus on the macro game, and if it just comes down to it, I mean, Gale Force does that better. That's it's the same game. You look at, okay, well, what are you going to do? Try to ban comfort maps from Gale Force? Okay, what are Superstars' comfort maps? Towers of Doom, Brax's Holdout, Cursed Hollow. What are Gale Force's comfort maps? Brax's Holdout, Towers of Doom, Cursed Hollow. And so it was just not a good matchup for them. That said, Gale Force really looked dominant in this series. Crowan's ETC play was very solid. Game 3 Diablo play a little bit shaky at times. But Gale Force looking good after that loss to Team Freedom last week really raised a lot of questions. So, heading in to our Saturday games, Naventic Team Freedom. Team Freedom on the way up, Naventic on the way down. And we're actually going to see here on Sky Temple, Insomnia going to go in a little bit too deep here. Going to actually get picked off, blown up real quick, and the chase is on. Team Freedom just trying to get away, but the slows are there. And Nasmus going to get pushed into the corner. Tychus soon to follow. And even though they got a lot of people on Naventic low, they weren't able to get the kill. And when you see this, you think, all right, there it is. There's Naventic. There's the classic Naventic team fight. This is why Naventic is going to make a comeback and make a show of this season. Game 2, however, we're starting to see the same sloppy mistakes. B-Kid out of position on ETC. Going to force an engagement that maybe not ready for. But here comes the blow-up onto Zul'jin. Oh, wait. Zul'jin's a troll. Taz Dingo. ETC goes down. Vala goes down. And just before Taz Dingo runs out, the Crystal Aegis going to keep him alive. 4 kills onto Naventic. And Team Freedom takes game number 2. Game number 3 now. Towers of Doom. Possible Player of the Week contender. As Tomster going to be able to sneak with the VP onto the fort using that Q. But, oh, the Death Mosh. 3 people stunned out. And the turnaround is so real as 2 people immediately get deleted. B-Kid trying to run. Ancestral Healing going to keep up Nasmas. Insomnia almost gets killed, but has to submerge this Tomster, and he's going to get killed. B-Kid chased down by Nasmus on the Li Ming. Zuna going to try to get away. 5-man wipe, and Team Freedom, who is down to 4 health points on their core, comes out to win. And they take game number 4 as well, en route to upsetting Naventic. Next series, Tempo Storm versus Team 8. This was a big one. Everyone was looking forward to this. Number 1 versus number 2. And, however, Team 8 takes an early 2-1 lead, but very much struggling at Sky Temple. Trying to go for the Desperation Boss. Fury's actually going to just get slowly boiled down, but there's so much damage coming out on the backside from Cattle and from June. And Tempo Storm forcing Team 8 to play in a position they don't want. Team 8 going to do everything they can to try to get this boss. Even with Glaurung on Medivh, even with the Zarya, they just can't keep themselves alive. Tempo Storm does a great job making sure that while people get low, no one dies. 5-man wipe in their favor. This took it to a game number 5, and game number 5 was all Tempo Storm. Big lead. Fury going to go in. Fury's ETC play has been great all season. He's going to capture Justin and Glaurung. Psalm looking for the VP, and he finds it. Justin going to get into the VP just long enough to get killed by Sulfura Smash. Glaurung popping the escape there, but the 2-man mosh going to make sure it goes down. Psalm's play on Zeratul has just really, really been strong of late. And Tempo Storm comes back from down 2-1 to win the series 3-2. So, there were two series that we were looking out for, obviously, on Saturday. Naventic Team Freedom. It was kind of a chance for Naventic to try to come back, or Team Freedom to show that beating Gale Force wasn't a fluke.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we saw, teammate Tempo Storm, number 1 versus number 2, both teams jockeying for a position on top. I think both those teams will still be clash bound, especially when we talk about Sunday's games. But that was a good series, I thought, between Tempo Storm and Teammate.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a lot of fun to watch. That one seemed to be a few of the games were very lopsided, and maybe one or two of them were a little more close. But it was just that weird lopsided nature where Teammate dominated one match and then Tempo Storm would dominate the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's something Teammate has just kind of had happen. Like, when things go their way, they know exactly how to make the play. They know exactly how to enter the team fight.
Mm-hmm.
And we see, we'll talk about Gale Force in a bit. They lost one of the maps on Gale Force to something like 19-0 kills on Tomb of the Spider Queen. Like, they could not get a kill on the map, and they still won the series. Spoiler alert. I don't know if that's just a Teammate thing, if that's just the meta is so unstable that, like, people are still drafting horrible comps that cause that to happen. But it kind of... It's happened a few times in NA this season, and that wasn't the only instance. So, Naventic, though, continuing to struggle, losing 1-3 to Team Freedom. And while that Sky Temple game was really back and forth and close, Team Freedom kind of cleaned Naventic's clock in the other games, I thought.
Yeah,
I don't even necessarily know what to entirely make of that. But now we head in to Sunday. So Sunday, first big game, Gale Force versus Teammate. This was a big one. This is number 2 versus number 3 in the power rankings. And Gale Force down early here. Gale Force down 2-1, trying to fight for their tournament life here. And, oops, I appear to have started at the wrong point. Forgive me. As Teammate going to try to look for a turn-in. NA production quality right there. Teammate going to look for a turn-in, and Justin going to try to find Michael Udall, but all of Gale Force is there, and immediately Crone with the separation, trying to get the Horrify, but it's not enough, as Tychus is going to get absolutely deleted. Bud's running for his life, but Prismat going to get picked off the backside with the turnaround onto Justin, and Glaurung running for his life on that little Ragnaros, but it won't be enough. And, Gale Force taking it to a Game 5. But in Game 5, we're going to see just one of the best, most aware plays. Yoda flying in, catching Diablo out. Casters covering it up with the talent screen. But Equinox now out of position on Diablo. Forcing to engage, so you think Falstad's going to die, right? And he does. But the VP is huge. Followed up with the Torabus Mosh into the Sulfurous Smash. And Gale Force bodies are flying everywhere. Glaurung on that comfort pick Zeratul. Zeratul starting to make a huge impact in NA play. The Void Prism combos this week were pretty big, as Gale Force actually going to lose to Teammate second week in a row with a loss. Heading into our final series, B-Step versus Team Freedom. This is a big one with clash implications. And once again, the VP going to be used to get a good initiation onto Team Freedom, but absolutely running for his life is iDream on the Zeratul, and the zone out works. Stage Dive going to push it out further, and with just one health on their core left, is Team Freedom going to win as they start to get kills, but McIntyre flies to the bottom, separating out Team Freedom. They have to overcommit on the adjustment. In the meanwhile, Li Ming going to get picked off, and the trades as McIntyre 1v1ing a Thrall and winning. Tychus doing everything he can, but McIntyre with the chase down onto Insomnia. And B-Step with a big win in game number 1, heading into game number 4, up 2-1. B-Step looking to put the series away. we're going to see Tomb of the Spider Queen taken out. And we're seeing McIntyre with the mind control on Sylvanas. When's the last time you've seen that in pro play? But it's the perfect initiation as the Ring of Frost APOC combo is going to take Tychus, and it doesn't stop there. So much damage coming out. Zugrug going to go down. The Earthquake going to set up Insomnia for the pickoff. And once again, B-Step doing a good job at keeping everyone alive, even though they're low. I thought APM played very, very well this week. B-Step going to get the 5-man wipe en route to winning the final series of the weekend. So, final day of the weekend. Gale Force and Team 8 was definitely the highlight match heading into the day. B-Step Team Freedom, though, definitely had some interesting implications for overall standings for who's going to go to the Clash. And I was surprised to see B-Step play really just as well as they did. B-Step winning 3-1, and they won convincingly in the games they won as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely what we would at least what we expected coming from their days at Denial and at the very beginning of this season as they were auto-qualified into HGC just due to their appearance at BlizzCon. But over the first 2 weeks, we definitely did not see a B-Step that functioned very well. Granted, they had a tough schedule, and now they are coming up on a little bit easier opponents, but still, it's good to see them coming back and finding that synergy with one another again.
Yeah, and this was, at the beginning of the year, if you told me B-Step is going to, dominate Team Freedom and that they're going to play as well as they did that weekend, I would say, well, yeah, they're Denial. They're going to be one of those 3 teams in the Clash, but even still, despite dominating No Tomorrow and pretty strongly making a statement against No Tomorrow, they're still definitely on the outside looking in because of their struggles early in the season. Mm-hmm. Granted, who have they had to play? They've had to play Gale Force and Tempo Storm early. They had to play Team 8, who is resurgent, who has played well. So it'll be interesting, I think, because now they've played both the top and the bottom. And I love Team Freedom. I love what they've shown. I'm still not convinced they're one of the top 4 teams, as many seem to be. Mm-hmm. But now I think this week heading into, with the teams they have left to play, Naventic and Superstars, that's going to be really telling of at least this half of the season for them. So going to go ahead and turn it over to our standings here, where things stand after week 3. Tempo Storm, now the lone undefeated, No Tomorrow, still the lone winless team, as Naventic did get a win over No Tomorrow, but still lost to Team Freedom this week. Team Freedom, despite all the pizzazz around them, still sitting at 2-3, still pretty far down the standings. But, still superstars in that top 4. I think that's surprising. I think it's also a factor of who they played, and I think it's likely to change this week, as we'll talk about. But
sure,
top 3 holding the same. Even though Gale Force lost, they're still in that top 3 along with Tempo Storm and Team 8. Tempo Storm and Team 8 did swap places, but that was because Tempo Storm beat them. So I think I agree that the top 3 are probably the best teams, although the inconsistency from Gale Force is still a deep concern, and I think B-Step has a chance to make something happen. Obviously, B-Step has to rely on someone beating Gale Force, but we'll talk about that as we look at the Western Clash. So, again, the Western Clash, going to be the top 3 teams in North America as well as the top 3 teams in Europe. At this point where Europe's at, it's almost certainly going to be Misfits, Fnatic, and Dignitas. There's an outside chance that if Dignitas throws a couple games that they shouldn't, that you could see a team like Playing Ducks or maybe even Team Expert sneak in there. But even that's improbable. So it'll be interesting to see how these teams fare against that. I think Europe's big 3 is obviously globally competitive against the Korean teams we saw last season. And I'm still worried that North America's not going to be competitive with Europe. Nothing I've really seen this year, relatively speaking, has allayed my doubts that much.
Yeah.
Tempo Storm did very poorly in global play, and they still don't look that clean, and they're still the best team in NA. I don't know if that's me just being a doomsayer, but it's where we're at. But with that, let's look at the race for third place. So, just because I didn't have room on the slide, I didn't include Naventic, but Naventic still about as alive as Team Freedom. Actually, slightly better odds, as we'll talk about in a bit. But all these teams chasing Gale Force right now, so we're seeing B-Step at 2 and 3. I have them at 4 here. This is relative to our power rankings. So our power rankings poll actually has B-Step ahead of Superstars at this point. But looking at the games left, now Gale Force, gonna play Tempo Storm, gonna play No Tomorrow. They'll almost certainly beat No Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Tempo Storm, probably gonna be Tempo Storm. So if you look at a 4 and 3 Gale Force, then you have to look at, and actually I have these backwards. Superstars is going to be playing Naventic, B-Step, and Tempo Storm. B-Step will not be playing themselves. And
I was wondering, but I didn't really want to
and
call
B-Step
attention to it.
is going to be playing Superstars and Naventic. So I got those backwards in terms of who they're playing. B-Step, though, with 4 games left, and I think... B-Step with just 2 games left, and I think both of those are very winnable. And if they get to 4 and 3, they lose the head-to-head to Gale Force. But if Team Freedom can get to 4 and 3, then what you have is a triangle for third place. And at that point, if B-Step can win those series 2-0, they actually have a potential to displace Gale Force. So there's a lot of mechanics that can be involved. Still, with 10 games left, there's... my math says 10,024 games, 10,024 possibilities, or not 1,024 possibilities. But even then, because of tiebreaker rules being what they are, you have to look at not just who beats who, but also do they win 3-0? Do they win 3-1? And there, Gale Force has a huge advantage. They have 2 3-0s, one over Superstars and one over Naventic. So that puts them still in the driver's seat despite their struggles with teammate this week.
Mm-hmm. And plus, in that prediction there, to get to that triangle, you would have to have Team Freedom beat Team 8, which I just don't see.
Right.
So,
well, the other possibility, so Superstars actually does have to play 3 games, and B-Step. The problem for the thing that favors Gale Force is the 2 teams most likely to get to 4 and 3, given who they're playing, are Superstars and B-Step. Teams that Gale Force has both beaten. So in order for Gale Force to be displaced, you're going to need to see some kind of weird thing happen where it's likely, because I don't see Gale Force losing to No Tomorrow. So Gale Force will have to lose the Tempo Storm, and you would have to see some kind of triangle that involves Team Freedom, because Gale Force has beaten every team but Team Freedom. So in order to make weird, interesting things happen, you pretty much have to see Team Freedom beating Team 8. And improbable though that is, we also said Team Freedom would never challenge Tempo Storm and be destroyed by Gale Force. So, who knows? We'll find out. They did take Tempo Storm to 5 games. So I think it's a lot more likely than people think. Naventic, though, actually still at 1 and 3, could get to that 4 and 3 mark. They're going to have to play B-Step, they're going to have to play Superstars, and they're going to have to play No Tomorrow. As much as Naventic has struggled, those 3 games, in my opinion, are winnable.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they lose the tiebreaker to Gale Force, so they would need Team Freedom in the mix, except then Team Freedom would take the spot because they beat Gale Force and Naventic. So fun to game out these theories, but a lot of work to do, and so much work, in fact, that I actually made a simulator. So using some just Monte Carlo simulations, starting with the idea of, okay, well, let's just assume every game's 50-50. I need an assumption, but let's just see what's even possible for a team to make the top 3. And in fact, because Tempo Storm has to play 3 games, there's actually the possibility for a little bit of madness. Looking now at where this is at, so Tempo Storm, if every game's 50-50, even with 3 games left, still at 95% chance to make the Clash, and Team 8 safe at 87%. That's where it gets interesting, because Gale Force and Superstars are actually both at 40 if you assume every game's 50-50. Now, Superstars has to play Team 8, so 50-50 does favor them to some extent. No Tomorrow technically not out of it. Now, when I saw this, I thought there's a bug in my program, and so I looked for where No Tomorrow got in. So here's what has to happen. No Tomorrow has to win all 3 games, and there can be No Tomorrow has to win all 3 games, and Gale Force, Superstars, B-Step, Naventic, Team Freedom, all of them have to be at 3 wins. And if that happens, so it involves a lot of weird losses mechanics that I just can't fully explain. If that happens, because No Tomorrow is mostly playing teams in that lower group, they would actually have some tiebreaker advantages. They would also have to win those games 3-0, by the way, because they would need 3 3-0 games. So it's incredibly improbable, but that's what 0.5% is.
Mm-hmm.
Being a little bit more realistic, so I add some subjective rankings, so things like I say Tempo Storm has an 80% chance to beat Superstars, Gale Force an 85% chance to beat No Tomorrow. These are my own subjective opinions, but, trying to get somewhat of a more accurate number. We do see the top 3 is what we would probably expect. Tempo Storm, almost certain. Team 8, almost certain. Gale Force, the most likely, but Superstars and B-Step still hanging around if enough crazy things happen. No Tomorrow's at 0%, but it's not technically 0%, so that's why that asterisk is there. So, fun with simulators, that's what we have. But given that, let's talk Western Clash for a bit. So, obviously, I don't think either of us think Tempo Storm or Team 8's going to fall out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're both in agreement Gale Force is probably the most likely team to get in, just for a number of reasons. Tiebreakers being a big one, even though they have to play Tempo Storm. But my question is, if one of these teams can get in, if one of these other teams can get in, which team do you think would be best for NA at the Western Clash? Do you think it would be Gale Force? Do you think it would be Superstars? Do you think it'd be B-Step, who's been resurgent lately? Team Freedom? What would end up with NA getting the best result, if we can even hope for such a thing?
I really don't know. I mean, like you said, Gale Force has struggled on the global front. My worry, and this comes with everybody worrying about kind of the 4 Flex and Akaface, is that when facing other regions, Gale Force is going to struggle because those roles aren't as clearly defined, those roles aren't as clearly practiced. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my worry is if Gale Force gets to the Western Clash, maybe they do not do very well at all against, the European opponents.
And while the seeding isn't explicit, what I should note is the way they suggested it. It's going to be the number 1 team in each division is going to be in the same division as the number 3 team, and the number 2 team from the opposite region, as well as one of the minor divisions. So if Gale Force is number 3, though, that puts them in the same division as likely Tempo Storm. And that puts them in the same division as probably Fnatic, maybe Dignitas. So they wouldn't be... If they're in 3rd place, that's almost better than being 2nd, because then you don't have to play Misfits, who I do think is the best team in Europe. But getting either Fnatic or Dignitas is hardly a consolation prize. And just me saying it right now, I think, okay, so the number 1 team in both divisions is very clearly going to be Misfits and whichever team is in the other division between Dignitas and Fnatic. Mm-hmm. That's not a good sign for NA that I'm so convinced of that. And maybe I'll be proven wrong when we get there, but I think while this stability I think will help NA long run, I still think that they're still recovering from effectively 3 straight seasons with a roster apocalypse, where we saw at the end of summer rosters fell apart, at the end of the fall rosters fell apart, and then there were still roster changes happening heading into the qualifiers. Let's not forget, McIntyre was going to be on No Tomorrow. He was going to be in there instead of Airho. And Airho, I think, has struggled a lot with No Tomorrow, so it may have been better for No Tomorrow to have McIntyre, but he was added extremely late to B-Step. Prismat was added as late as you can get to Team 8. I mean, he was added after the qualifiers were over, and even then, you're talking about he was kicked off of Superstars the last week of the qualifiers. So we're still seeing that roster change. The stability hasn't had time, I think, to take effect yet. Whereas in Europe, we're seeing one player switch on Dignitas, which has been kind of something they've struggled to fill that tank role for a while. But Fnatic and Misfits are just incredibly stable.
Sure. So I guess you had me answer who you think would be best for this Western Clash.
Right.
What do you think out of the teams vying for that third place spot?
I think the best result would come out of Gale Force, but not at the Clash. So I think Gale Force is a team that has shown a work ethic since adding Equinox especially, where they have been able to adapt very quickly to new situations. That's part of why their flex strategies worked. I think no matter who's in that third place position at the Western Clash, they're going to get beaten by the second place European team. I think the best you can hope for is that they don't lose to either Latin America or Australia, New Zealand, which as the instability in those regions, that would actually be legitimately devastating.
Sure.
I think Gale Force, though, would gain the most out of the international experience. I think B-Step also still has potential, but I tend to think that players like K1 Pro and King Calf have been around a long time, and I kind of hate the metaphor, but I do think they peaked, and I think they just haven't ever reached that same level they were at BlizzCon in 2015, just in their individual play. So I think Gale Force has still the best potential to grow because of their player personnel. So I think they benefit the most. I don't think it would affect the Clash, but maybe the mid-season brawl, you could then see Gale Force get up into that top 2 position and possibly do well there.
Sure.
That's
I think I think that global experience would be really helpful for Gale Force, because the last time they saw it was in the summer, and they had those travel issues that were completely, I think, plaguing them. Probably.
For those who don't remember, in the summer of last year, the Summer Global Championship was in Sweden, and en route to Sweden, Michael Udall and Akaface were waylaid for about 2.5 days in an airport. They arrived in Sweden literally like an hour and a half before they had to play their first set. And then eventually they beat Big Gods 2-1. They lost to My Insanity 2-0, but it was a very, very close 2-0. My Insanity now Misfits. And then something didn't look right against PBA, and then there's that famous mistake that's become a meme, VP Core, by Mike Udall. But I do think that if it weren't for the travel issues, I do think they would have played better. I still think, though, that coming out of the summer, them getting rid of Fury is a mistake that they have not recovered from, even still. I think you look around NA and you think, who's the best tank in NA right now? And
Fury.
It's Fury, and Just Sting's in the conversation, but it's Fury.
Sure.
Just in terms of consistency. So I still think that was a mistake on their part. But anyway, getting into the weeds too much. So B-Step had a good weekend. B-Step been struggling all year. Comes out, goes 6-1 this week. Now, granted, they were not playing top-tier competition. They had to get that out of the way early. They had to play Naventic in week 1, who they beat. No, not Naventic, sorry. Tempo Storm, who beat them. and they played Gale Force, they played Gale Force and Team 8 in week 1. They played Tempo Storm in week 2. So out of the gate, they've played the top 3. Now they've played 2 of the kind of the lower tier teams. They have Naventic, who's been struggling, and they have Superstars left on their schedule. If they win those games, they get to 4-3, and I think with the improvement we've seen, I think it sets them up well for Phase 2. Even if they don't get to the global competition, I think they're still a player in that top 2 positions, which is what's going to matter the most in Phase 2. Well, specifically being in top 6. Number 1 gets a bye to global competition, and 2 and 6 play a linear playoff. But after last week when we were talking about potentially being Crucible bound, so that 7th, 8th position in Phase 2, I think we finally saw this week just them being able to win a late game team fight consistently. And I think that's really was the delta between them being a good team and them being a bad team. And I think right now they're a good team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I don't have too much to go off of here. I was traveling this weekend for my job, and so I took notes and I watched all of the matches, but they're not as detailed of notes
Right.
as in the past. But I was definitely liking what I was seeing out of B-Step, especially compared to the previous weeks.
Mm-hmm. Well, APM, I thought, did a great job of keeping people alive who got low. They did have trouble on Dragonshire, which was their first game of the weekend. They did have trouble putting that one away. So they actually took 3 fights post level 20 where they won the fight but lost someone late in the fight so they couldn't end. And finally they managed to get the engagement where no one died and they were able to win the game. So still a little bit of struggles. But McIntyre's play was just incredible. The plays against Team Freedom, especially on Towers of Doom, were great. I think B-Step starting to kind of bring it back to where we expect them to be.
Sure. I also think it's fun to see them bringing out the Tyrande. And I know that you pointed out in the very beginning that Tyrande and Chromie combination, but it was fun, at least to me, to be able to see that Tyrande. I think some of the Reddit community is upset about the resurgence of stuns. And I know Dreadnought is not a fan of Tyrande, but I thought it was fun to at least see her come back out.
Yeah, and then, the Chromie Tyrande was interesting. I don't really know if that would work against more organized teams. I think,
sure,
Team Freedom still has a little bit of greenness about them, and so if you go counter meta, it seems they struggle with that. That said, I guess, B-Step's somewhat resurgent, but that brings us to Superstars. So Superstars had a hot start to the season, starts out 2-0, and then, since then, they've gone 2-2. Now, they've had to play Team 8, but Team 8 mopped the floor with them 3-0. And then they play Gale Force, and Gale Force mops the floor with them 3-0. So Superstars still in the conversation at 2-2. In theory, they could go 5-2. That's unlikely, given that they need to play Tempo Storm, given that Tempo Storm has been particularly strong in the macro game, which is where Superstars tries to make their bread and butter. But are we seeing Superstars kind of revert back to that inconsistent team that finished 8th in the 2 fall regionals, 7th, 8th in 2 fall regionals? Do you think that they're potentially going to improve from here, or are they potentially going to decline and maybe even find themselves, in danger of Crucible in Phase 2? What are your thoughts?
Who all do they have to play?
They have to play B-Step, they have to play Naventic, and they have to play Tempo Storm.
Yikes.
B-Step, Naventic, and Tempo Storm. I think the Naventic game is very winnable. I think the B-Step game, what we saw from B-Step last week, I think it's winnable, but not as winnable as Naventic, certainly. I struggle to see how they beat Tempo Storm, just because Tempo Storm also, beats them in the macro game, just like Gale Force did. So, teams that do well in the macro game are going to generally, I think, outplay Superstars given enough time to do it.
Sure, sure. And I mean, I don't have the strongest knowledge base when it comes to Superstars, but from my understanding, from what the casters have been talking about, is that they typically, when they can bring out some kind of unique comp, that they can put a lot of pressure on the other team, just because the other team maybe doesn't know how to fight that.
Yeah,
and it seems like
Oh, go ahead, finish.
Oh, I was just going to say, it seems like lately a lot of their team compositions have been fairly standard. I mean, we saw Cho'Gall against Team 8, but I don't know if maybe now that they're here in HGC, they want to try and play like everybody else, and maybe that's just not suiting them. I don't know.
So I've always heard this line that Superstars can bring out the cheese and pull upsets. And I think the only time I've ever seen it work was once we saw Faye on a Nova on Towers of Doom. But they brought out that cheese last fall and finished 7th, 8th at regionals both times. And didn't even qualify for... it was either I think it was NA Nexus games that they didn't even qualify for. So... the casters constantly bring up this line that they're gonna be crazy, they're gonna pull out this cheese, and I think the cheesiest thing I've seen them do this year is the Cho'Gall, but then past that, like, they had a game with a solo tank and Uberak once, and that I mean, it was a Battlefield of Eternity, like I could see that happening there. I think they can play standard. I mean, they play standard in that kind of macroscopic sense. So slightly more standard than Gale Force, which maybe isn't saying much. I think their drafts have at times been a bit lacking in specific abilities, like maybe Lockdown when they've tried to go, into like a solo Zarya tank. But they've mostly avoided that. I just think ultimately they play okay standard, but I think that maybe they're just, relative to HGC. Obviously, they can beat me any day of the week, but relative to HGC, I think they're just, at best, kind of destined to be an okay team. And I don't like saying that because Sray's shot calling this season has really been solid at times. And at times, you kind of see a little bit of hesitation from Superstars. But when they're winning, like, the shot calling of how to get advantages off of teamfight wins has been phenomenal. So I like the team. I'm unconvinced that they're ever going to be like any type of global competition material, especially in this newer format where there's much fewer LAN events. There's really only 4 LAN events for NA teams this year.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. I also agree. I hate to say that as well. And I love Sray, and I love what he's done in terms of producing content and getting the community to learn more about these heroes. But at least this weekend specifically, I saw him get caught out of position quite a bit.
Gale Force has been really good at picking people off.
Yeah.
But also, it's a situation where if you only have one game in a week and it's going to be against Gale Force that came out looking incredibly focused, that got pretty much what they clearly wanted out of every game in this series, it's going to be hard to beat them. Again, that kind of takes us back to Gale Force's innate inconsistency because they didn't have that. They had that killer instinct in 2 games against Team 8, and they lost the other 3. But let's not slip back into that one. So, well, with that, I guess my question is, going back to Gale Force, do you think this is a team that is destined for inconsistency? Or do you think this is a team on the cusp of greatness? I don't know, but if I had to pick one, I think they're on the cusp of a group that could dominate NA. I really do, because you have Fan on that team, you have Equinox on that team, you have Crowan on that team, you have Akaface on that team. Akaface still widely regarded as one of the best supports in NA, although Buds has definitely made a play at that this season.
Hmm.
Equinox, still a very solid player, although his tanking play has times underwhelmed me.
Yeah.
Rowan is just, you tell him what to do, and but come the next tournament, he'll be playing that hero among the best in the country. He's just, there is always this one trick narrative, and it's just every time, it's like, oh wait, we need someone to play Vala. He comes out and plays Vala. We need someone to play Tracer. He comes out and plays Tracer.
Hmm.
And I think once you have that core, and then you have Fan, who is just, I still think, the best individual player, I think they're gonna get there, but I'm starting to get impatient. That the rotating roster where we've seen Fury go, we've seen Rafflecopter go, we've seen B-Kid go, that's no longer an excuse now.
Hmm.
So if they're going to make a play at greatness, that has to start now. They have to beat Tempo Storm. And then in phase 2, if I really want to say great, I want to see them go 7-0 in phase 2. I think they can, honestly, but they have to stop, I think, being cute at times, and they just have to play. They have to prove that there's a reason they've gotten these great players in Fan and Equinox, that they've gone to great lengths to incorporate those players. And
Sure.
that's, so I don't think they've lived up to their potential this phase. Especially losing the Team Freedom and Teammate, I think is good, but if you want Gale Force to actually be like what people are thinking of when they think of NA, you can't lose those games. And so going into phase 2, they need to just win all of them, I think, for me to be fully convinced that they actually have a potential to revive NA.
Sure. Yeah. I think that while I do have a few kind of hesitancies when it comes to the flexing system, I do think that they are probably one of the more, if not the most creative team in NA right now. And so I think that as long as they keep using that to their advantage, because they have so many very strong individuals that are wonderful at the game itself, as long as they can continue to kind of go outside of the box, I think that they'll probably be pretty good in phase 2. I don't know if they'll go 7-0, but I think they may get close, especially if they can get to the Western Clash, and no matter the experience that they get there, if they do well, that'll motivate them to, push even harder for phase 2. If they just get blown out of the water, then that'll motivate them that they need to get a lot better come the end of phase 2.
Yeah, and I think it really does start with this week with Tempest Storm. I think this is where we're gonna learn a lot about them, because they know they've been inconsistent, I think, and I know they have the potential. They've beaten Murlocs before, although not in a really high pressure situation, but they have been able to. Actually, I don't think they've ever beaten Murlocs, come to think of it. Not since the team reformed. So this is their chance to do it. With that, gonna go ahead and jump into superlatives. So let's talk first best series of the week. And normally I tend to go with the 3-2 series that was the closest and most back and forth. I'm breaking that trend. I am going with Team Freedom Naventic, and to celebrate that, I put Team Freedom B-Step on the screen. So that was a misplay. Going with Team Freedom Naventic here. I was very impressed with the plays Team Freedom was able to make in this series. I thought we did see some life out of Naventic. It ended up not being that close, except the Towers of Doom game. Ended up being really close with a huge turnaround. Brax's holdout was early Team Naventic. Team Freedom ended up winning pretty big. But the plays in this series were just fantastic. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah. What would you go with for series of the week?
I would actually probably have to say Gale Force and Teammate. It obviously wasn't the cleanest series in terms of one side dominating the other, kind of flipping that back and forth. But I thought that at least for the games that it was close, it was definitely close enough, and it was probably the most entertaining one to watch. Although I did really, really enjoy the Team Freedom Naventic. And like you said, there were a lot of highlights in that one. There were a lot of really cool plays.
Yeah, there were. And when we get to plays, actually, well, let's go ahead and talk plays of the week. So I think I know where you're going here because you posted a video with your number one, and it's definitely hard to disagree with. It was the Death Mosh, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I think the reason why I chose this was early on in that game, ETC was just getting destroyed, and Naventic is great when they need to blow something up. They can blow up a target like that. And so early on in that game, they saw ETC. They destroyed ETC, and this was Towers of Doom, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so Towers of Doom.
Yeah, so I have the highlight queued up, so let's go
Sure.
ahead and just let Gilly and Dread do the calling here. So here we go.
The Fight Freedom wants. They need to move in as aggressive as possible. Even taking this, there's going to be a
That
three-man
VP
void.
to set up the
my, this Q, it's going
core.
to drop. Mosh Pit is not, or excuse me, the ETC
There
is
it is.
instantly going to be blown up again, but the Death Mosh is coming in, and two people already dying. Tomster comes out. B-Kid, though, is already on full retreat. Ancestral lands. Insomnia is on the retreat. He will survive. Throws out the lightning there. The bell tower now going to be converted. Tomster gets Wave of Force right on out of there. Zuna not hitting his W. The reset, and everybody is now dead for Naventic. Oh my goodness.
Death metal! Zugrug knew everyone was focusing.
And so there we go. The Death Metal turns around an early kill for Naventic where they're up. Team Freedom only has 4 health left on their core. I mean, you know, they were a shrine away from losing. And because of this, they turn around, they take 5 keeps, they get 2 shrines the next phase. And they're able to win the series. So that wasn't just a play that won them that fight. That was a play that won them the game. So it's definitely hard to contest with that. And possibly I picked, you know, my play of the week just to somewhat be contrarian. It was also on Towers of Doom, and it also involved Team Freedom, but this one involved B-Step and the plays McIntyre made. So once again, gonna cue this one up and let Gilly and Dread
Oh,
Him channeling is not the answer.
No, King Effie jumps on top of him, and he turns around. He did get taunt, has
This is the
Ice
moment.
Block. Void Prison's been in the back. It actually knocks, the Gust knocks a lot of people back in there. There's Twilight Dream. It hits I Dream. Can they take him out? They're still alive. They're still alive through all of that. Here comes the stage dive, too.
It's not going to really hit anybody, but the power slide is going to set up the nuke there after the bolt. Now the flight. McIntyre is going to bottom. Everybody is mounted up. I think the Q from Odin is going to be in range. Oh! They buy the time onto bottom. 2 people dead, though, for Freedom. It's not over yet. Insomnia's in the 1v1. Will he be able to win that? Mac gets the trade fairy and ends up going down. So 2 for 2 so far into this game. Dansky's there, is still in the Odin. Insomnia's withdrawing. He goes down now 3 for 2. B-Step has the advantage, but it is not looking pretty. Is that Q from Dansky? The nade, is it enough to confirm the power slide? He needs a follow-up
Zugrug
damage.
cleanse, the cleansing touch.
Oh!
Zugrug's gonna die.
And the nade
It's
missed.
only Dansky left. 3v2.
Oh.
B-Step have played this out especially well, considering the fact that they did not get the
So the-
initial pick.
I know that highlight was about 5 years long, and I mean, look, I'm going bold. That's how long it was. But wow, just that whole fight. You know, even though they get the kill onto Mouth, they managed to get the counter kill. But McIntyre with the wherewithal to fly down to bottom. Keep in mind, when he flew, Varian was extremely low on health, and it forces Tychus and Thrall to just give up on the chase on Varian to address the fly. And so because of that, that fly set up a 3v2 where Li Ming gets picked off. Then you have to see more adjustment on the part of Team Freedom. And somehow, with no health on Karazim or Falstad or Zeratul, they managed to just get kill after kill after kill, and they win the game off it. So, while certainly not as instantaneous a play as that Death Mosh, which just clearly changed the game on a dime, just intelligent and aware play by B-Step, really outthinking Team Freedom there. You know, knowing to get out when they're low health, McIntyre flying down to force the separation, which played in favor of B-Step. Just all in all, a great play.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that leads into my player of the week. So I am actually throwing it at McIntyre. McIntyre had been, I think, struggling this season as the rest of B-Step had. I hadn't seen the synergy. His Kerrigan play was impressive in my opinion. Oh no, he didn't play Kerrigan. That was Team Freedom. But his Falstad play was fantastic. His Falstad play really, really won the game. Twice for B-Step. So I gotta throw it his way. Who are you going with for player of the week?
This one was a lot harder than the first 2 weeks for me, but I kind of tossed it around back and forth, and I think my player of the week this week would be Fan.
Mm-hmm.
Just with how much damage and his positioning on Vala, it was just outstanding. We saw a lot of nice Zeratul play as well. But overall, it was, a very entertaining week. So it was tough to pin down one player.
Yeah, it was. And actually, it was the Tomb of the Spider Queen play I showed earlier where Fan's positioning on Vala was just devastating. The Gale Force gets teammate in the hallway, and there you have Vala sitting right outside the hallway just going free strafe because, there's a wall between her and the rest of the team. So Fan has really been consistent. Gale Force has lost many games for many reasons. They've lost games for drafts. They've lost games for Equinox being out of position or Mike Udall or Crowan. I can't think of a time they've lost a game because of Fan. And I can think of times that they've won games just because of Fan. So
yeah.
He has that reputation of being, if not the best player in NA, he's certainly on any type of All-America team you'd put together. And he has quietly had an absolutely brilliant season, even though Gale Force has not really lived up to expectations. Although Mike Udall has actually been incredibly strong this season, really other than his Vikings game. I think a lot of their failure just comes down to weird drafts and, allowing themselves to get picked off from time to time. So, but, they have a chance to move forward, and they'll do that this week. So the final, on a sad note, worst team of the week, Team Naventic for me, and I'm tired of talking about how Team Naventic isn't living up to expectations and how they've just been bad this year. So that's it, Team Naventic. Who's yours?
No, I would have to agree.
All right, so we're done talking about Team Naventic then.
Yeah.
We've spent 2 of the last discussion periods talking about Naventic and what they need to do to get back on track. Here's what they need to do. They need to stop playing like shit. And as soon as they do that, then maybe they can start winning games. But, beating No Tomorrow 3-2 as your only win of the season, I'm just done talking. All right, well, heading back over then to our power rankings poll. So this power rankings poll got a lot of votes late because I got some attention with that Monte Carlo simulator on Reddit. So it did make a couple last-second changes that I've accounted for. So, I got to put that in present mode and a production quality. But power ranking poll, still the same top 3. Even though Gale Force lost to teammate, they look strong enough against Superstars that they stay in that top 3 position. B-Step, though, with the big jump up, jumping Naventic, which I expected, Superstars, and then Team Freedom. Of course, beating Team Freedom is going to help you do that. But so B-Step really the only mover, and everyone else just moving down to make way for B-Step. But overall, power rankings poll was pretty solid. It was actually somewhat close between B-Step and Team Freedom, and it's actually not that far apart between Superstars and Naventic. No Tomorrow was almost a unanimous number 8. Tempo Storm was pretty much unanimous number 1. Not a surprise. They beat Team 8. So, they're still the only undefeated team and the only winless team. But, I guess, I look at it and I think I agreed with it completely. Heading over to our polls, so I did agree with it completely. You had B-Step and Team Freedom, though, in separate order. B-Step beat Team Freedom. So I'm just curious as to your reasoning there.
I I had a defense for this when I did it, and I did it yesterday, and I don't really remember why it was the way that I put it. I still think that Team Freedom composed with a lot of new players. I think that they still have actually maybe a little bit more talent than B-Step.
You're saying
what you
a
were
higher
talking,
ceiling in this case? Okay.
in terms of you were talking about how B-Step perhaps maybe they might have peaked now. These are veteran players, but they've been around for a long time, but maybe they've kind of hit their peak, whereas Team Freedom has surprised us. I think a lot more in the first 3 weeks than B-Step has. So
Okay. I still think B-Step beat Team Freedom, but I guess maybe you're looking ahead to phase 2. So we'll see where it goes. I think Gale Force just played dumb against Team Freedom, and because of that they lost the series they should not have. I have trouble thinking of that as not a fluke. I do think Team Freedom has a lot of potential. I just don't think they're that good yet relative to the top 3. I think B-Step has a chance to make some challenges, but we'll see where it goes. So, Week 4 preview. First game, this is going to be between Tempo Storm and No Tomorrow, 1 versus 8. I said 3-1, and the reason I did is Tempo Storm always seems to find a way to lose a game. Like they claw defeat from the jaws of victory at least once. And as bad as No Tomorrow has been, they've shown flashes of ability to make a game-changing play here or there with Casanova if he can get an Artanis. So I'm going 3-1 there, but I definitely don't begrudge you the 3-0.
sure. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about there in terms of...
There isn't. It's number 1 versus number 8. But
yeah.
You know what happened the last time number 1 played number 8? When was that? Gale Force versus Team Freedom.
Huh.
Anyways,
Sure.
I should note, I had Team Freedom at number 7, so I was much higher on them than the poll community. This takes us to Naventic and Superstars. This is definitely an intriguing matchup because Naventic has struggled as much as they have, but Superstars, many people, myself included, just still are not sold on them. I still think Superstars wins this, and the reason is I'm tired of picking Naventic to finally, this is the week Naventic shows up and does well. I'm just tired of saying it's going to happen. It's not going to fucking happen. They're playing bad, and Superstars will win, and Superstars will go out of their way to make it interesting, and they'll make bad plays. But my thought is, Naventic's had plenty of chances to not look bad, and they've failed at all of them. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I guess I'll hold on for one more week. Maybe this is the week that Naventic decides to show up. Maybe.
Well, all right. Jumping in then to our Saturday game. So this is going to be Superstars and B-Step. This one, also big implications. The winner of this game stays in contest to potentially get into that Western Clash if Gale Force trips up, or, Team 8 manages to lose 2 games. I don't know any crazy number of other options. But if we see some kind of craziness happen, the winner of this game potentially gets the Western Clash. Now, we're both picking B-Step. I've been a bit higher on B-Step after this week, I think, than you have. So I think it is somewhat surprising to see B-Step. I have them 3-2, you have them 3-1. This might be, though, because I think we have different levels of faith in Superstars. I think Superstars can make this game interesting, and I do think they somewhat match up well against a B-Step team that tends to not do great in the macro game. I could honestly see this set going either way, and I did toy with picking Superstars here, but I think B-Step has more to play for, given that they're much more likely to finish the season out 4-3, just looking at other games they play.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that, especially granted that I have Naventic beating Superstars, I think that Superstar slide will continue on into Saturday. And I think that B-Step, now that they are, they played the best, they played the worst, and now that they're here in this middle area, I think that maybe they will find their groove, they will find their place. So
you're gonna have Superstars down at 2-4 after Saturday. That'd be
think
four
so, yeah.
straight. That'll be 4 straight losses for them. That'd be pretty devastating. But
Mhm.
I could definitely see it happening. I did pick Superstars in the previous game, but we'll see. 3-0 teammate over Naventic. I'm not talking about Naventic anymore. Teammate looks great. Glaurung is such a good player. He's my MVP of the season, far and away. It's like, here's Glaurung, and then like fans here, and then the rest of NA is kind of way down there. But there's still a big gap between Glaurung and Fan. Glaurung has been the reason Teammate has been doing as well as they have. I think he took a huge leadership role in making the team what it is now. And I think this is a 3-0 sweep. Obviously, your previous thought of maybe this is the week Naventic shows up, and then you're like, yeah, but they're still going to get destroyed by Teammate.
There's a big difference, and I think a big gap between Superstars and Team 8. But I think as long as Glaurung plays well, he hasn't been shut down often in the first 3 weeks. And the one thing that kind of calls to mind was game 2 against Gale Force, where he lost his Master's Touch quest twice.
Right.
As Medivh, and I don't know. I don't think Naventic could shut him down.
I think he's gonna be all. And like, depending on which hero he gets, but if he ends up like on a Zeratul in a game, or he ends up on a Ragnaros, I think he's going to make their day not pleasant. Even if he's not playing the heroes we've seen him do particularly well on, who are less engagey. I think if he gets on those engagey heroes, he's going to have a lot of success against Naventic. So we'll see where that goes. Then the big one Sunday. So this is the biggest game of the weekend, and Tempo Storm versus Gale Force. I'm going to admit this is incredibly biased, and it's because I'm a Gale Force fan. That is all of my reasoning right there. That's it. I'm a fan, and I'm making a fan pick.
Fair.
Or fans team.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also a Gale Force fan, but I really highly regard Tempo Storm, and I've been watching them very closely since the fall. And I think it'll be close, but I think that Tempo Storm will be able to, like you said, grasp, or I guess get that victory pretty late.
It's odd and probably hypocritical that I'm tired of waiting for Naventic to win, but somehow I keep expecting Tempo Storm to lose. Whatever. Taking us into Team Freedom No Tomorrow. 2 teams that were expected to be at the bottom of the pack heading into the season. One of those teams has met their expectations, and the other team has exceeded them. Actually, no, I take that back. No Tomorrow was... Everyone thought they'd be 5th place entering the season. Like, everyone thought they'd be 5th place. So I take that back. No Tomorrow, people had somewhat high expectations for heading in because they did well in the qualifiers. And, they've swapped place with Team Freedom. No one had expectations of Team Freedom. Team Freedom is now 4th, 5th, depending on, which poll. It's actually 5th. I forgot to update this number. So Team Freedom is 5th right now. But yeah, I mean, we both have Team Freedom winning. I still think we'll see some signs of life from No Tomorrow, but not really much to talk about in this one. Again, No Tomorrow just hasn't even been on my radar because of the way they've been playing.
Yeah.
So with that, I guess that takes us into final thoughts. I think after this weekend, it'll be almost certain who's going to be in the Clash. The games in the last week are not as interesting. We don't have any of those like really big kind of top 4 games that we've talked about. You have Superstars against Tempo Storm. You have Gale Force against No Tomorrow, which won't be particularly exciting. Naventic B-Step looked interesting at the start of the year, and there's a chance it still could be, but I don't know. And then Team Freedom and Team 8 play each other in the last week. Which, I guess early in the year we all thought would be a game to decide who ends up at the bottom, but then Team 8 has completely outperformed expectations, and Team Freedom has been okay. So, not as many exciting games, though, next week, so this is, especially with the Gale Force and Tempest Storm game, this will be a good week. This is the last full week of HOTS. I should just make a note that... So, Flag, you mentioned to me, and I'm just, saying this publicly, that you may not be back, if not next week, but there may be a time where you'll step out. You're still absolutely welcome to come in as a guest and always have you. But I just say this from the standpoint of anyone watching. If you think that you can talk bullshit half as well as me, then maybe you can, co-host with me. And if you can talk bullshit twice as well, then I'll give you the show. So, with that, possibly the last show hosted by DB Smiley before a calm bullshitter takes it. Flag, thank you again for coming along this with me.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. You do a wonderful job preparing this podcast, and I think it's a lot of fun to talk about. So hopefully the viewers agree that it's a lot of fun to listen to watch. So thanks.
All right. And with that, signing off for this week. We'll see you next time on 323 Weekly. Keep a lookout for the Power Rankings poll to come out after this week. It'll be the last Power Rankings roll heading into Week 5 before we have the postseason where we know who's going to the Western Clash. Additionally, I am announcing that the pick'em that I was doing has died just because the workload involved in it, as well as managing this podcast. I had to pick one, and I chose this podcast. So I do apologize to anyone who participated in that. But I will be keeping up my Monte Carlo simulations week to week, and I'll look forward to doing that in Phase 2 as we separate out not the top 3, but the top 6. Those who will be in HGC and those who won't. We'll see you next time, however, on 323 Weekly. Thank you again.